I think I felt like that was my ability, that was my contribution, right? That was the thing that was the unique thing I had to give, right? It was never about, like making money or, or anything along those lines. I really wanted to, that was the thing I felt like, so you're put on the earth, I think, for sometimes for specific reasons. I felt like that was the thing, and that I could actually make a real contribution, um, societally, I guess, which hopefully doesn't come off arrogant or anything like that. But I felt like that was the thing I could contribute. Um, and in the small business side, I think I almost didn't, I think it was subconscious for me, the experience I shared earlier. And that's why I gravitated to that area, was because, but I had so much passion, and still do, for serving small businesses and helping them. I just love, like, I mean, I love that compulsion to have a business, start a business. I always wanted to put small business owners on a pedestal. And that was, I think that's the reason why I gravitated towards that area, was my personal experience. And also I felt like that would also have the biggest impact, societally, that I could have.
It sounds like you were unconsciously serving uh, yourself 3, 5 years before you started the business.
Yeah, actually probably 5, 6 years. Yeah. But
Right.
that's the way it actually turned out. It's funny, when I, sort of when I had this realization of, which wasn't called cash flow as a service, but this money in, money out, money at rest, which became a mantra that we used internally for a long time, like helping customers manage the money coming in, the money going out, and those fortunate situations where they have money left over. Um, a lot of that was surrounding the feelings that I had as a small business owner, which I knew were not unique to me. I knew were commonplace among small business owners, because I knew I was good at the thing I was doing. I knew I sucked at that part of my world, right? And if I sucked at that, then probably, even but was good at the other stuff, there was probably a lot of other people who were in that same position. The funny thing is, that same thing happened when I started Kabbage years later. I walked away from, generally a good living to start that company, and also didn't have any money when I started it. Um, it's a sickness mostly. Um, it really must be. I mean, there's really no other explanation for it. I ever since I was a little kid, I had this dream of starting and running a business. I remember when I had a job coming out of college, I took the bus from downtown Philadelphia out to, the apartment where I lived. And we would pass these, like, I don't know, mid-rise buildings, 7, 8-story buildings. And I would see, and I would, like, imagine, what if I started a company and I had an office, like, on that floor, and I would, like, mentally point to the floor in the building, like the 6th floor on the corner there, and there was like 6 or 7 employees. How cool would that be? Like, how amazingly cool would that be? And I didn't know what the business would be, but the feeling of the excitement I had in my body for starting something like that, it was almost like I was so fixated on it. And that was for my whole life. I was like that. And so I've always had this natural compulsion to, be an entrepreneur. And, and so how do you do that? Like I said, it's a sickness of some sort, but it's just a belief that you can create something. It was just something that I felt like I was sort of destined to do. And, something I really felt like I needed to do. And I failed a lot, obviously, as I shared with you. I failed a lot along the way. Um, and but it didn't break that spirit. Like, I feel like every time I failed, I learned a little bit more. I think a lot of my early life was spent, I think coming up with, let's talk about a couple of things. Coming up with ideas, um, is kind of like any other skill in life. You have to practice at it. And so what I started out at a very young age is, and I didn't do this consciously at that point, but I think I realized this over time, is that every single time I encountered a challenge, not like personal challenge or something like, jumping hurdles in middle school. But, every time I saw a challenge like out there or a problem somebody had, I trained my brain to immediately go to what would be the solution to that problem. Right. And so I have this notebook from when I was a kid of these ideas I had. And they were just observations of challenges that were out there and what my idea was. And I believe so. I believe so much. I don't believe that I think the concept that great ideas come like in the middle of the night. You suddenly sit up in bed and you come up with an idea, kind of like how Paul McCartney wrote the song Yesterday. Like that doesn't, like, I don't have that kind of inspiration. It's not like I'm in the shower and I like, oh, there's a great idea. What I literally, it's like every time I encounter a challenge, I go, okay, how would I solve that? And that's it. That's an idea. So I think that's part of it. I think also failing, and it's very trite to say that, oh well, everybody fails before their success, and it's not how many times you fall down, it's how many times you get up. All those things are true. But again, it's like any skill. You're not, the first time you try it, you're not going to be as good at it as you are down the road when you try it. And the only way you get better is if you realize you're not very good at it, and you seek information and knowledge and you try different things. And so that's the other part, which is like when I started this company out of college, I like figured out this concept. I built a product, I manufactured the product, and then I went to release it and I realized I didn't know anything about marketing. Like I didn't even know I needed a marketing budget. I had blown my whole budget on making this product. And I was like, oh, like people just won't buy it. It's not gonna be like Field of Dreams where you build it, they will come. And so I didn't really appreciate the marketing side of what was going on. And so I think for me it was about that kind of repetition and failing and trying again, but having that drive to not give up in that situation and to try again. I do again believe that coming up with ideas, I think you have to spend time. Like people will see me in meetings and I will literally, I'm not sleeping. I will literally at times have my hand over my head or my eyes closed and I'm just thinking, right? I'm listening and I'm thinking about what's going on. And I'm trying to use, the whatever creative, energy I have or capability I have to try to add value to that conversation. And you to me, you have to set aside time. I started saying this earlier that I don't believe ideas are like middle of the night or while taking a shower. I think the best ideas come from almost putting yourself in a meditative state around what you're trying to solve, and thinking through all the different angles, the way things will be impacted, like literally immersing yourself mentally in what's going on. And I think you just come up with the most crisp, clear ideas, or at least I do, when I put myself into that kind of mind frame. It drives me crazy if I can't come up with at least a half a dozen ideas to try to combat something. Right. I literally concentrate on the stuff and try to think through it, and sometimes what you're doing is you're not coming up with ideas, you're just coming up with more questions, which is okay too, because that allows you to investigate, right? Like, hey, I'm wondering, I have these questions, like if this were true, then we could do this other thing, but I don't know whether that thing is true, so I need to go talk to people about that. Or I don't know whether somebody else is doing this thing, so let me go do some searching to figure that out. Like I'm a big believer in, I believe that there's a solution to every single problem out there. So I start with that thesis, right? Every problem has a solution. I also start with the thesis that every solution might not be easy, but that's not the solution's job to be easy. It's the solution's job to be a solution. right? So, to me, you have to, like I always believe that sometimes, like what always like, and these guys know this, what I always like, a trigger thing for me will be when somebody says, oh, we could do this, but that'll be really hard. And my response to that will always be like, so what? That's what our job is. Our job is hard. And by the way, creating solutions that are difficult to be derived actually creates a huge amount of value and a competitive advantage over others. So, sometimes thinking of something, like that, like here's what the customer experience should be. Oh God, getting to that's going to be really difficult. Well, if it serves the customer the way you want to serve the customer, then we kind of have to do it. So too bad. Like we got to figure out how to do it. That's sort of my perspective on that stuff. The idea for Kabbage I was actually doing a brainstorm. This is a little bit different. I was doing a brainstorm for another company. And I have these like techniques I like to employ when I brainstorm sometimes. And one of the
Can you share
techniques,
about them?
yeah, like, so I'll give you a couple of examples. But the one I used for Kabbage that led me to that idea is preparing for this brainstorm. I had this brainstorm which goes, what if one company in one space bought a company in a completely different space? What would they do with it? Which is kind of this juxtaposition you create, this natural conflict you create in your mind. And at that time, the question was, what would happen if eBay bought a company that issued credit? Like, here's a marketplace. They hadn't bought Bill Me Later yet. They hadn't done any of that. What if they bought a company that issues credit? And it occurred to me like, oh, they would provide credit to the small businesses that sell on their platform. And then it occurred to me, well, how would you actually go about doing that? Like, what are the challenges with doing something like that? And so I thought through the challenges and I had a solution for it. And that's really how Kabbage kind of came to bear, which was this fortuitous situation where I decided that if I was going to teach somebody a method, that I should use the method as an example during that session. And so I decided to come up with an idea based on that method that I could present to them the next day as an example. And that was Kabbage. Um, that's how Kabbage came up. When I was a kid, my parents asked me to go take the garbage out. And I was a lazy kid at times. And I didn't really feel like going and putting my shoes on. So I said, wouldn't it be cool if there was a sock that had really heavy rubberized bottom that you could, so you wouldn't have to put your shoes. You could just go and take the trash out, without having to do that. And so I had this idea for I'm sorry, this sounds on. I had this idea for this concept, which I never acted on because I was like 9 years old. But then a few years later, I saw that Totes came out with something called Toasties, which were a sock with a rubberized bottom. And now they're actually very commonplace out there. Recycling was becoming very popular when I was a kid back in the early 80s. It wasn't that popular. And my parents, would ask me to, keep the bottles separate from the rest of the trash. So I was like, well, what if you could have a trash can that had two compartments, one for recycling and one for regular trash. And I thought, oh, that'd be a really cool idea. Like, probably not monetizable, and not like even if I had had the wherewithal to do something, like what the heck would I have done with it? But it was a solution to a problem I saw. And so I just started training my brain to look at these situations and try to come up with answers. And sometimes now the nice thing is there's probably a lot of people doing that. You can actually Google, figure out if anybody's actually come up with the idea that you came up with. I think most people are driven by one of two things, and it can vary depending on what part of life you're talking about. And those two things are fear and desire. And I again, like, I must be missing something in my brain because I operate more out of the desire part of my brain than I do the fear part of my brain, or I rationalize the fear and go like, how big is that risk, right? How like if I failed, am I really failing? Like, what is failure? So maybe I just redefine failure in such a way that I don't see it as, I don't see the downside as failure. I see it as, you know, just another piece of learning. I actually, and I think we've applied that, I think I apply that at work too, which is, I always say, I always had this saying, which is like, there's 1,000 shitty ways to acquire a small business customer. You have to be good at all of them. There's not just one way to find a small business customer, and so you have to try a lot of things. And I actually think when you try something, it's likely the first time you try it, you're going to fail, and meaning it's just not going to work. Does that mean it was a bad idea? Well, it could, or it could mean that you just didn't execute well on it. And I would say 80 or 90% of the time it's poor, and it's not you screwed up, it's just you lack knowledge. That's why it didn't work. So I believe you have to try it a second time or a third time, and then you have to like plot out, what you've done and say, am I moving in the right direction? And if I continue on this trend, will it ultimately be a really, really good outcome? And so I'm sort of a big believer in that. I also, do you have to get good at failure? No, but you know what? I have a lot of sayings. I also believe in, like, I use this GYAFB. Wait, yeah, GYAFB. I actually got the Twitter handle once. Shockingly, it was available. Um, and what that means is give yourself a fucking break. And it's a little bit about like not being so hard on yourself when certain things are around you. And that's what you sometimes have to do, is sit back and realize like, hey, I'm trying my best, I'm doing the best I can. And you can use that in a lot of contexts. Like, I've used that in personal context with my sister-in-law, who was having challenges when, my father-in-law and her father was in the process of dying. And I said, give yourself a fucking break. Your father's dying. It's okay if you're, not like as put together as you ordinarily are. That's okay. And I think a lot, life is just that way. And so I don't know. I'm also just a believer that, it's, life is just a composite of experiences. And if you think back to your life, it's just a series of memories, and those things that you remember are those things that stand out most. So what you want to do is you want to fill your life with as many things that stand out as humanly possible. It'll make your life longer and it'll make your life richer, and so I'm just a big believer in that. Starting and building a business is a hot mess. And if every time, and I always felt comfortable going to Jonathan, that's also the thing that was really good about it. I was always comfortable to talk about the hard part of building the company because I knew he wouldn't freak out. I was also fortunate because Kathryn was my co-founder, and I always view Kathryn as my, direct and equal, or even more than equal, counterpart. And so, the ability to talk through issues with her, was a form of a support network for me, and I hope vice versa. She also, from a motivational standpoint, like, I'm more of a worrier. So I talked about this a little bit earlier, but, she would tell me, her constant refrain is, things are never as bad as you think they are, Rob, is what she would say. Things are never going to be as bad, or not going to turn out as bad as you think they will, Rob. And my refrain back to her is, but probably going to be worse than you think they are. So, I had a natural support network thanks to Kathryn. I also at home had a good support network with Dana and the kids, just actually helping me get my mind off of work, not trying to solve problems for me. And then I had, honestly, Jonathan, was the number one guy, somebody I could, and a lot of times it was just listening to me. I wasn't looking for somebody to solve my problems. I was looking to vent. Where I was looking as go like, can't figure this damn thing out, but I will, but I got to just speak out loud about it. But I think you do that early and often. Like you don't wait till everything is in a really bad position and then you do it. You try to anticipate as much as you can. And frankly, I think over worry about stuff. Most of the stuff will resolve itself. But if you've prepared properly, then the things that won't resolve themselves are things that you're ready to handle. I believe in taking action. So, that's the way I always thought through it. Well, for me, it was about realizing that the creative journey wasn't stopping, right? And when it did, so Tara and Kat will tell you that, and Jonathan, frankly, that they'll remember periods of time that we weren't really creating new products and thinking about new markets. Well, maybe we were always doing that a little bit, but not as much as we should. And so I think it's really important. I'm a big believer in disrupting yourself, even at an early stage in a company's life. I'm a big believer in trying a lot of things. A lot of people are like, focus is great, right? But I had this one boss years ago, I was running a sales channel for a large direct marketer of collectibles, and what he said to me was, he goes, Rob, this is the way marketing works. He said, you have your channels, you have your funnel. What happens over time is those channels degrade and they close up. So your funnel goes from here to here. So you have to constantly be pushing the funnel back out, right? So you have to constantly be adding new things in to resist and push against that natural tendency for things to deteriorate over time. And I think it's the same for products and markets and things. I think that applies to well past marketing and sales and stuff like that. So I believe that you need to constantly challenge yourself and, push for the next thing. That's going to get you there. I mean, obviously you got to get up off your feet and you got to show that you have success in what you're doing. Or you have to iterate from that and do, and modify what you're doing. So that's how I think you keep it fun, which is, you work to disrupt yourself, create new markets, and enter into competition with other organizations, because you launch these things and you naturally come into conflict with more parties when you do that. And so I actually like competition in a market, because I think it forces you to be that way and think that way. I think it probably goes back to sort of that concept of work-life balance. I creating stuff and pursuing those ideas is my kind of intellectual curiosity. It is what I enjoy doing. Not particularly great at a lot of other things. And by the way, it's a very frustrating field, because even if you're really good at it, 1 out of 100 ideas is reasonably okay. So you have to generate a lot of ideas to get really good ideas, which is something I think a lot of people should think about, right? Who want to be entrepreneurs, which is, just, it's like anything else in life. Volume is going to provide you with output. It's like if you want to become a great speaker, and you only speak once a month or once every 3 months, it's better to go to the local, churches and other things and speak as many times as you can every single day, because you'll get that much better at it that much more quickly. So I think just, that was a tangent, so I apologize. But I think, look, I mean, it's my passion. It's what I love doing. It's what, gets me excited in the morning, getting out of bed, and what helps me fall asleep at night. Sometimes maybe it keeps me up too, but it's it's just something that, stokes that curiosity. A lot of people get their, get that fulfilled in their brain different ways. It's just the way my sort of brain works. And so, it's never, it honestly, it obviously, given the background I share with you guys and the financial trauma I've had in my life, it's not really about, it's never been about making money. It's great to be able to support my family and do those things. And that's very, very, very hypercritical. Um, you know, but that won't be what, I'm retiring for me is not, like an ordinary option. I want to be around ideas, even if they're not my ideas. I'd rather learn about other people's ideas too. It's just fun to me. It's what I enjoy. It's what I collect now.